Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for this homeschool informational video. We want to thank you all for coming out to our homeschool informational night several weeks ago at 412 Church in Murrieta. Many of you submitted questions, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to answer all of those for you in this video segment. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Brittany Greer. I'm a homeschooling mom to 3 kids, a middle schooler and 2 elementary school students, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce Danielle.
Hi, I'm Danielle Nunez. I have 6 children ranging in ages from kindergarten up into 9th grade.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Lyons, and I have 4 kids ranging from age to 11 to 16. Actually 11, 12, 14, and 16.
In the description below this video, we're going to be linking a ton of information for you. The one that we'd like for you primarily to watch is the one from HSLDA, which is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. So if you have a chance, please visit www.hslda.org. We're going to go ahead and get started by asking some of our teachers here how they got started and why they decided to homeschool. So Jennifer, can you let us know why you decided to homeschool your kids?
Yes, of course. I've been homeschooling for 11 years now, and since they were all in kindergarten. And I will have to admit that I didn't exactly want to homeschool our kids. It was my husband who asked me to pray about it. And after prayer, when my oldest daughter was about 4 years old, much prayer, the Lord did lay on my heart that this was the right decision for our family. And so we've been homeschooling ever since.
Thank you for sharing. I got my start in homeschooling. I was homeschooled. I left in junior high school, the public school system, asked my parents to homeschool me. And after much overcoming, I was able to do that. I graduated through the homeschool system and decided that I would never send my kids to public school.
I started, initially it was just because when it came time to send my oldest to school, suddenly it just shocked me to be handing my kid over to somebody that I didn't know. And so we had known a homeschool family, and we really respected them and loved how their children were. And so we were like, okay, we'll try it for a year or 2. And then as we began the process of homeschooling in our family, we saw how it just brought us together and all of the benefits that we'll get to later, just how it impacted our family, and we became more committed to it. I always felt more called by the Lord to homeschool, as far as just wanting to be able to come alongside my children and to train them and to educate them was really important for me. And for my husband, he was very lenient and allowed me to do that, but I would say just the indoctrination that's happening at school over the past few years has just stood out more to him, and that's kind of more his why now, is just looking at it. And I think for parents who are considering, should I homeschool or not homeschool, the reality is everybody teaches from a perspective. I teach my kids and other children that come into my home from a Christian perspective. And just like I wouldn't send my child to a different faith, educate at a different faith school, or even the public system that has a different viewpoint. So in the same way, I think we just have to accept that every system is going to be giving some type of indoctrination or perception into the education system. And so for us, now that has become a huge reason why we homeschool and why we're thankful we have been homeschooling all this time.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to be discussing some of the legal aspects here in California with homeschooling your child. And so one of the things that I really, really would like everyone to do is visit www.hslda.org. I can't say that enough. It's a wealth of resources and information. We're going to be linking a ton of videos for several other questions that they can do the best job explaining. We're not going to pretend or offer any legal advice, but these are actual attorneys that are advocating for your homeschool freedom, so I highly encourage you to check that out. California is still considered a lenient homeschool state, believe it or not. And in California, you have 3 options to homeschool your children. The first option is considered a home-based private school. Now, with that, you're not functioning and putting yourself in a school system. Your home becomes the school. The very first thing you need to do is withdraw your child from the public school system if that is something you're looking to do. I recommend contacting your school administrator and following their procedures. There is a video on hslda.org that gives you step-by-step guidelines. They even have a pre-drafted letter that you can utilize. The second option that you're going to be looking at is the private satellite program, a PSP program. Jennifer, can you explain what that looks like?
Certainly. There are in your communities, there are private schools that usually have a private school satellite to where they offer homeschooling options, groups where you can meet other moms that are in homeschooling with you. It's a great resource to get to meet other people. And also, the nice thing about those private schools is that they do hold your files for you. So they do keep your all your records for your children's, and it is under the umbrella of that particular satellite program that you go through. So you do have, it's nice because you do have the guidance that you would need through these private schools. And the best thing to do is kind of start out with the churches, and a lot of them have the offshoots there to offer you these programs. It's a great way to start.
So in this valley, as far as the PSP program option goes, that's option number 2. Look in the valley for local churches, like you said. They're typically going to call it an ISP program, Independent Study Program. The third option is instruction via tutor. And so, Danielle, do you want to take that one and just kind of explain it briefly? We're not going to venture there because it's not one that we're really advocating for.
Yeah, and this one, I believe, requires it to be an actual teacher, right? Yeah, so this might be an option for people who have a little bit of money that they want to spend, that are thinking about hiring out a tutor for their child. They don't want to be part of the public school system, but either you both work, or you just have the funding available, so you do that. In California, I'm pretty sure it's a lot of the stars, the movie star kids that are doing it, that have a tutor that is coming there. So it's not an option that probably is available to most of us, but it is an option to hire a teacher.
Great. There is also a misconception that I want to clarify, and many people have heard about charter schools in the Valley. So if your child is enrolled in a public charter school, they are not homeschooled. The charter schools are a public school entity. And so there is a misconception with that. A lot of people have talked about getting funds or receiving funds, or working with a teacher that they tutor with regularly, or have that option too. Again, that's not a homeschool option. So there's really 3 viable options if you are living in the state of California. Today we're advocating for option 1, which is the home-based private school option. We believe this one offers the most freedom for families that are looking to homeschool. Some of the requirements that you'll see in the link video below is you have to maintain an attendance register. You have to teach core subjects. The instruction has to be taught in English. And there's certain courses of study that are required. Again, those can be found on hslda.org. We're going to move into a day in the life of home-based private schools. So we're going to be discussing some questions that we've gotten emailed to us from several of you. And so we're going to go ahead and start with what are the pros of homeschooling? That, some of the options. We're going to talk about pros and cons, but let's start with pros first. Danielle.
Okay. What are the pros of homeschooling?
Yes.
Everything. I love homeschooling. It has bonded our family. I know where all of my kids are at. I know what they can read. I know what they can't read. I know what they know because I'm hands-on, involved with them all of the time. We will do things like go to Knott's or Disneyland, and we study in line on the days when other people can't do those. So it's allowed our family to go camping and do all these things because we can do our school on the road, or we can just make up for the days that we're not there. And so it offers a lot of flexibility for us, and it gives me the opportunity to teach from my perspective. When I'm talking about history or another subject, I'm able to constantly be coming back to, well, what does the Bible say about this? What does the Lord say about this? What does God call us to do? What should they have done in this circumstance? That's just mixed in that discipleship all day long in all avenues of their education.
So I'd say primarily for all of us, and I think we would agree, that one of the main pros of homeschooling your children is flexibility and freedom to be able to offer our kids an education that is unbiased, or rather biased from our perspective, and that's exactly our God-given authority as parents. Yes. As far as some of the cons, okay, and we want to be very real with parents about this, is what are some of the cons that you would say to homeschooling, Jennifer?
Well, there are some cons if you want to look at them that way. It's a lifestyle, so you live just completely engulfed in your family all day long. So if I were to pick out a con, some people would see it as you lose some of your freedom. You know, it's how you look at everything. I say there's more pros than there are cons, but it's how you perceive your day. If you look at it as a burden all day, then yeah, that could be a con. But for the most part, the pros really do outweigh the cons. You do sacrifice some of your time, but your children are so young for such a short period of time. They have the rest of their lives to be adults. This is the time that they need you the most. They need you to disciple them along their journeys, to be there, to correct them. I absolutely see it as a privilege to be with my kids all day long. And some people may think I couldn't do that and would treat that as a con. To me, I get to build up these kids to where when they're ready to leave the home, they are ready. They're well equipped.
That's awesome. So in a sense, you're giving up some freedoms, but gaining more freedom in homeschooling your children.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing. And what we're going to be also talking about is, I know that in my home, I have different learners. I have an older son who's more of an independent learner. I can hand him his information. He can go. He's a checklist-oriented kid. I've got younger ones that I've got to stay on top of. One of the things, I love the quote that says, learn to read and then read to learn. So what we're doing as parents in the homeschool community is we're equipping our children with keys to become independent learners. And I know our day-to-day is going to look different for every single family. Every family is going to look different. You're going to have more structured learning, and you're going to have more unstructured learning. And that varies for each family and for each child. So if you guys could briefly share, I've got two different styles here. So Jennifer, tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like homeschooling.
Certainly. The grades that I'm teaching now, I do have one in elementary, 5th grade. I have a middle schooler in 7th, and I have 2 high schoolers, a 9th and 11th grader. And so there was a time when I had them all, K through 5th. And those years are more involved. And the whole point is every year you're teaching your kids to become more independent in life and also in your schooling days. So the beginning years, yes, I was with them all the time teaching, but as the kids, every year, there's a subject they do solely on their own. There's a following year, 2 more subjects, 3 more, and then I'm at the point now, especially with my high schoolers, that they're just basically checking in with me. I'm checking their work. So when they're little, yes, of course, they're stuck at your hip, but the whole point of homeschooling is to teach your kids to be independent. So a day for us is I spend more time with the 5th grader, and the 7th grader is half and half, and my high schoolers are pretty independent, but I definitely check up on their work.
Sounds like you've done a good job. Danielle, tell us a little bit about your day-to-day.
I'm very type A. Anybody who knows me knows that. And so for me, I like a lot more structure in our day, especially because then I do want to be able to just take off and know that on the days that I'm home, we get a lot done. So usually from about 9 to 10:30, I'm doing school with the kindergartner and the 1st grader. And because they're not fluently reading yet, I have to sit there. And you'll see with younger kids, you kind of have to be all hands on deck. They can't read the instructions for their math book. They can't read, on their own. And so it's very labor intensive. I would say, like, on my part, I have to be involved in that whole hour and a half with my kids. During that time, my older 4 are working on something else independently. And then from there, I switch my attention to the middle 2. I teach their math lesson and any writing, anything that's hands-on with them. And then they'll continue to work independently. And then after lunchtime, I usually spend about an hour kind of going over whatever it is that I need to go over with my oldest 2, which currently are 8th and 7th grade.
Great. A common question we get asked is homeschooling for everyone? A dear friend's husband said that homeschooling is for every child. It's just not for every parent. And we're going to unpack this question slowly with some of the misconceptions about homeschooling that people have. There's several things we want to address. So first and foremost, we have a lot of parents that come to us and say, I know I should homeschool. I just don't want to. I don't really get along with my kids. I have a problem child that I'm not wanting to deal with, and it's going to be exponentially difficult trying to homeschool this child. Danielle, what are your thoughts on that?
So many thoughts. First, I totally agree. Homeschooling is for every child, but it's not for every parent. And I am so passionate about homeschooling, but I also want to step back and say, you have to recognize your own home situation and what's going on also. If you're having a really difficult relationship with your spouse, if there's an alcoholic in the home, if there's some kind of situation that your child will be in by being home with you that is not safe for them or healthy for them, then you do have to step back and say, this isn't the season for that, and you need to deal with those issues. Kind of in a similar way, if you have a child and you feel like, I could homeschool, I would love to be involved, but this child is just so difficult, I can't handle dealing with them, then I would say, you need to deal with that situation. You need to take this time, more important than them learning the math or reading or whatever else is going on. You need to take the time to invest in your child and help your child work through whatever defiance issues, whatever is going on with your child that is creating so much difficulty that you feel like you're just looking forward, I can't wait to drop them off at school. There's going to be hard days in every family. You might have a difficult situation with a child. But if you're actually sitting there thinking, I don't like my child, or I can't be stuck with them all day, please do your child a favor, do yourself a favor, honor the Lord, and get help. Whether that means you're stopping and setting other things in your life that have been distracting you aside, which I think that's one of the big cons of homeschooling is it does take a lot of focus, so there are things that you have to set aside. And you just pour your heart into that child. And if you can't do it, that's okay. That's why the Lord has given us a church family and other friends. Get involved, ask a pastor for help, and start working through those issues, because one day your child's going to be married, and whatever issues they have with you, if you didn't take the time to work through them, they're just going to bring that into all of their future relationships. And so I would just encourage parents, if you have a child and you're thinking, I can't deal with this is the time to deal with that.
Absolutely. We just want to make one thing evidently clear, is that those of you that are looking for an opt-out of the public school system, if you're looking for an alternate means to take your child out and put them under the authority and schooling of someone else and make it someone else's responsibility, that's not what homeschooling is. All of us here are believers in Jesus Christ, the God of the Bible, the one true living God. And so we take that responsibility as the authority figure in our children's lives very seriously. And if that's not something that you're willing to do, then homeschooling may not be the best option for you. And so we want to just make it clear that there's no cop out. There is a lot of work that's involved in this. So with that said, some misconceptions about homeschooling that we get as far as socialization. Jennifer, you want to attack that one? A lot of parents think if your kid's homeschooled, they must not be socialized. They must be sitting at home all day.
Yes, absolutely a misconception. And then you have to also define socializing. And, you know, socializing for our kids is very different from what the world would consider socializing. I see the world considering socializing kids with maybe 35 other kids, all the same age. Our world of socializing is our kids interacting with all groups of ages, all the way to seniors. So it's a wonderful thing that we do when you teach your kids socializing, and I say that very loosely. They are able to interact with everybody, their peers, the broad ranges, being able to go into a grocery store and be comfortable asking for help, being comfortable running in and running an errand for me, going to the store real quick, grab this. There's things that the kids are taught at home to become independent, but also to learn structurally what I would want them to learn. So socializing is really a misconception in the homeschool world. I know it's a common thing that people ask us, but the kids socialize way too much.
I would say, if anything, if you're homeschooling your children, they're going to have more freedom and more time because they're able to sit down and focus and have diligence to get their work done and get it done quickly. And so when you can have a positive work ethic in your home where your kids are nailing out their work, they have so much time to explore other subjects. They can become interested in careers early on. They can get jobs early on. And so it's a really beautiful thing. Again, freedom, flexibility. I see those as concurrent themes happening in the homeschool world. Another question we often get asked is it possible to be a working or single parent and a homeschool parent? How do you homeschool your kids if I've got to work? You know, I run a business. How does that happen? And I know you have some thoughts on that.
Yes, certainly. There was a time where I had 4 kids, 5 and under. My husband and I have our own business. I worked full-time from home. I did a lot of juggling while teaching those kids as they were getting into kindergarten, first grade. I was still working. There's a lot of they sleep in, I get some work done. I put them down for the night, I work after they go to sleep. I work between nap times. We just made it work. And then there was a time when they got older, I was able to go part-time. I'm still working today and at a part-time basis, but you can do it. We ran our company. My husband was gone a lot. I was able to manage the home, manage the job, all through training up the kids. We weren't scheduled to where school started at 8 and ended at 2. We sprinkled it in as Mama had time to do it, but it did get done. And because you have so much time during your homeschool day, you're able to tackle all of these projects and get them done. And I think that's the main thing for full-time, part-time parents is you can make it work. Just get the mindset out that it has to be done between a certain time. You can homeschool in the evening. You can homeschool on the weekends. Homeschool on your days off. Grandma is a great option. If you take them to daycare, you send them their work. Public school would have done that anyway if the kids were sick for a few days. They send them home the packet. It's no different. So yes, I am very encouraged by working part-time and full-time, and you can do it for sure.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that it doesn't have to fit the 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. structure. If you're going to be homeschooling, one of the things you want to do is get out of that mental box of thinking of what it has to look like. This is your time to take control of your home, your children's education. And again, it's going to look different for every single family. So I'm a small business owner. I run my business here locally. I'm also married to a husband that's in the military and is deployed for sometimes 6 months at a time. And so running a business with a husband that's deployed can be taxing while you're homeschooling. Yeah. It is possible. And again, those of you that are looking for an opt-out or an easy option, this is not for the faint of heart. You have to be willing to manage your time and manage it well. If you can run a business or you can work enhancing someone else's business, you should be able to run your business at home well. I would say all of us are firm believers in the Proverbs 31 wife, to be busy at home. If your household is not in order, if you can't manage the details of your home, we have no business going and serving other people. There are times where we do have to work to provide, some of us, to pay bills. It is possible. There are plenty of people doing it. I'd say reach out to your community. Look for other moms that are making it happen. The best way that you can find this information is to glean from other people and say, how are you doing it? What times do you do it? How are you working with this age? You have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to be a student and learn alongside with your students. Next question.
Can I address single moms?
Yeah,
Is
go
that
ahead.
okay? I have a heart for single moms, and I have seen a single mom who was living with us, and she was educating her children at home. And first, I want to say I know it's a difficult task, and I commend you if you are a single mom for having the heart to even desire to do that for your child when you're already wearing such a heavy burden of being both mom and dad and provider and all of these other things at the same time. It is definitely possible, and I would encourage you, talk to people at your church, talk to other people that you know, find a homeschool group to be in, because there are a lot of women like myself and like other women here that will have a heart to say, okay, I know you have to work between these hours. I can take your child for one of those days and I can educate them with my child who's the similar age. And that's what I've seen be very beneficial for single moms, is just building that community. And then maybe it means that when you do have time off later, you bless that mom and you make your own meal and you make an extra meal, so you're making dinner for her. Or sometimes you're not even doing anything at that time and you just accept that as a single mom, people in the church want to come alongside you and people that homeschool and love you and help you. But you have to be willing to have those conversations and talk to people and be open and honest about what your desires are and your needs are, and humble in allowing other people to come alongside you with that.
Yeah, and I think there's this really beautiful cyclical thing that happens is when you see a single mom that needs help, and all of us have met single moms that are homeschooling and making it happen, and it's not easy. We want to come alongside them, and so when those children of theirs need help, or they want to do a study together with our children are benefiting. They're getting socialization with a buddy or a friend that we're doing a lesson with, and then it just keeps going in a circle, and it's a really great thing. Yeah. Jennifer, you've had a lot of experience with the question, do both parents, mom and dad, have to be on the same page? And you had a similar experience. You were asking yourself that question early on in your homeschooling. Tell me a little bit about what you and your husband were thinking, what you guys were contemplating, and what made you make that ultimate decision to decide to homeschool.
Yes, that's right. I mentioned briefly how I wasn't exactly on board with homeschooling when my husband brought it to our attention. So he did ask me to pray about it, and he was inspired by a family in the neighborhood that had homeschooled. He'd see them all the time and was very impressed with them. And I did pray about it. I really did, because like Brittany had mentioned, it's not for the faint of heart. It's going to be work. It's going to be sacrifice. And so I did pray for it. I prayed for a year, and the Lord did put it on my heart that he wanted us to homeschool the kids. And so we weren't on the same page, but through prayer and his prayer, we were. I do encourage families whose mom and dad are not on the same page, whoever isn't, to pray for the other one. It does make it easier if you're both on the same page. I've seen mothers who've proven to their husbands that homeschooling works, and yes, that's great. I've seen through the last year kids being kind of forced to go home, and them seeing what they saw on these public school Zoom meetings. Yes, bring them home, and God can honor that. A lot of the moms who call me that need help are just so thankful that their husbands got to see homeschooling is the right path. So pray for your spouse if they're not in agreement. The Lord could do wonders with bringing opportunities to the family to where, yes, bring the kids home and homeschool.
And I think so many of us that are Bible-believing homeschool moms, we understand and heavily wear the role of making our homes a training place for righteousness. Our job as believers is not to just equip our kids with excellent math and reading and writing skills. We want our homes to be a training place. We're training our children for the battle that they're going to be facing in real life. And in the public school system, for those of you guys that are husband and wife that are not on the same page, I want to encourage you to make a list. Make your pro and con list and see what is holding you back. Because oftentimes what's holding you back is rooted in fear. It's fear of, well, what if our kids don't graduate? Or what if they can't get a job? You could say the same thing to somebody who has had a fabulous education. That's not our goal as believers. Our goal as believers is not to have the most educated child. Our goal is to have a child that lives and honors the Lord and follows him all the days of their lives. So we're going to move on to the next question here is, do you have to be an expert in every subject? You know, we're starting with kindergarten, which may seem easy to do and teach. What happens when you start getting into these upper levels, Jennifer and Danielle, with these middle school and high school levels like geometry and chemistry? How do you do that?
There's two questions that I'm always asked since since our family decided to homeschool when our oldest was about 4 or 5 years old. One, do you socialize, which we've already addressed that. And two, are you going to teach high school? And I'm here to say that I'm teaching 2 kids in high school right now. It went by very quickly, and we already addressed the socializing. When you start out in the beginning, yes, it's a little easier because you grow with your child, kindergarten, first, second, and you do grow with them, and you pick up a few things as a homeschooler. Actually, you pick up a lot of things. And then when you get into high school, there comes a point where I just don't really want to keep teaching math. I did it through 8th grade. In high school, I just don't want to keep going on with algebra, geometry, pre-calculus. And so I did outsource that. I use a math program called Mr. D Math, and they take over. It's an online class, and they take over that. Spanish was another thing. I didn't really want to teach Spanish. There's Spanish programs. So when it comes to high school, and if you're worried about that, you are not alone. The resources are huge in the community of teaching your kids in high school and still keeping with the state standards.
Mm-hmm. And so that leads us into the next question that many of you had questions about. And it's such a loaded question because there's so many different elements that fall under it, is what curriculum do you use? Do you use a box set curriculum, something that's pre-made? And so we're going to just unpack this whole curriculum question. So we're also going to be attaching some links in the description below for you to purchase different types of curriculum, ones that we all use or are common in the homeschool community. Let's see here. So what type of curriculum do you use, Danielle?
I'm kind of like a hodgepodge type person where I've put a lot together, for my students using teacherspayteachers.com. By students, I mean my kids. teacherspayteachers.com, and Kathy Duffy. She has a lot of reviews and kind of explains how each curriculum works. And then you can go on YouTube, any curriculum you're interested in, and look it up. Like, we love All About Reading. You can go search All About Reading, and you can watch moms who are unboxing it. They'll walk through how they use it, and it's a great way to be able to kind of compare a curriculum that you don't have in your hand. I do think if you have 1 or 2 children, it's a good idea to have in your mind, okay, I'm going to find what works really well for my child. But if you have multiple children, you kind of want to step back and say, what works best for me? Which curriculum, which style of teaching works best for me? And then you're just going to adjust it to meet the needs of your children from there. And curriculum is so hard because literally there's probably, 20 math. If we had 20 moms in a room, they'd be using 20 different math curriculum. And even at their ages, it's so dependent. So I would say, as you're looking for a curriculum, talk to other moms, get a lot of information, and go through them based on where your child is at and their age group that they are. I have certain books, though, that my kids sit down and they know they're just going to work through these. They just open them up. All About Reading is what I use for my youngest kids to teach them how to read, and I feel like it's a very strong program. If you have children who are dyslexic or have reading issues, it's phonics-based, and so it's recommended across the board. I use Saxon Math for my younger kids because I'm familiar with it, and so I can adjust manipulatives for that. And then we also use Mr. D Math for the older kids.
And one thing I want to make clear is you may be hearing a lot of names or terms thrown around that sound like a foreign language. None of us knew what these things were. This is years and years of experience that's been gleaned over the homeschool community by all of us. Curriculum is a very individualistic thing. And we say that in twofold because, again, if you have different children that are going to learn certain ways, then by all means, if you have the time, the energy, and ability to do that and to create a different curriculum for every child, go for it. At the end of the day, like Danielle said, she's got to pick what she's comfortable with, what's going to work for her. And let me just remind those of you who are leaving the public school system, you've had no choice or say in the curriculum for the past years of your child participating. You've only taken what's been given to you, and your child's been forced to adapt and learn from that and that alone. So,
So they're going to be fine. I think another thing that I would like to mention is I like to start with very simple. If you're new to the system, don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed. Just pick, they call it the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I know they don't all start with R. But you just stick with those, find those, and then every day you're working on those with your kids. And then when you're ready, you can add in science. And even for history, I just have my children reading novels from those times. I don't have them studying a book, necessarily a history book, but instead they're reading novels from that time. We're watching documentaries. They're doing special projects. But again, I know as long as they're reading, I'm fine. So if I don't have time this month to do some kind of extra special project for them, I don't worry about it. They're getting the basics of what they need. And so I would just encourage you, start very simple, start to get that routine going with your children, because it's a totally new way of your whole family life. Everything is shifting. And then you can slowly start adding in more and more. Another way when you have a lot of kids is unit studies, choosing to do things in groups. That's how we do our curriculum. So all of my children learn the same history at the same time, but maybe my older kids are going to be writing papers on it, and they're going to be doing some kind of research projects, and my younger kids are coloring pages. We're all watching movies. We're all reading books. There's a lot that we can do together that's really fun with that. And then they're doing their own math and those other subjects that we split out. But it just helps to simplify it so you're not totally overwhelmed every day.
Yes, and so you can see in Danielle's case with 6 kids, hers is about management. It's about streamlining everything for the same students and adjusting the level of difficulty for each student. And again, every family is going to look different. So Jennifer, tell us, yours is a little bit different, your style. Tell us about it.
Yes, definitely. My style is extremely opposite from Danielle's, and that's the beauty of homeschooling. That is why we homeschool, because your personality reflects how you teach your day. And so my way of teaching is, and I just want to preface that, I'm the type that follows the recipe. I don't veer off the recipe. If you tell me to put a cup of flour, I'm going to do that. So that reflects into my personality, which is follow the curriculum. So I used what they call a boxed curriculum. And when I first started, the different types of boxed curriculums are glad to send you their catalog. And so I remember having about 30 different catalogs, and you can go online, but they're happy to send you a catalog, and you can look through and see everything. There's scope and sequence. You kind of follow to where your kid is going to get plugged in, and it just is all set up for you. And so with a boxed curriculum, for me, I've been using the same company since my oldest was in kindergarten, and that is Heart of Dakota, and all the subjects are covered. All the subjects above and beyond. They have a mix of unit studies in there. It's set out day to day. It's scripted for you, which really is how it is in the public school anyway. It's all scripted for you. So for me, the teacher's manual is scripted. The books all come with it. You don't have to outsource anything. The math program is in there. If you don't like their math program, I used Saxon math instead. There's some flexibility in it, but if you just want to get to the point and have open and go, for me, like I mentioned, working part-time, working full-time, it was a good fit for our family. I had a struggling reader. Okay, I have a boxed curriculum. What do? I just slow the child down. Or I had a reader who excelled. I gave them harder books to read. So you can adjust it. So you don't ever have to feel stuck, but you can move on and adjust as you go. And to this day, I'm still using it through high school, and it's worked for our family.
So you can see 2 very different types here. So in Danielle's aspect with 6 kids, it's management, it's unit studies, it's things that are user-friendly for her. She's getting the same information to all of her students at the same time and pulling in different aspects to make it fun and interactive at every level. And then you see Jennifer, who's just very by the book, by the recipe, like she said, and there's nothing wrong with that. She's going to create and buy something like a boxed curriculum. It comes with a teacher's manual, a scripted, something super easy. It's a classic 7th grade history, language, science, everything in a kit. So this is, again, an entirely individualistic approach. You determine what's best for your family, what's best for you to teach your children, and you just make it happen. That's what all of us did. We had to learn before there was all these different resources. Again, if you have more questions about specific curriculums, we're going to be putting some links in the description below. One of the questions that we're often asked as well is, do we have to use curriculum that's aligned to state standards? Do you follow the state standards? And if so, is there a one-size-fits-all approach for everybody? Like, do we have to follow 7th grade math standards completely?
I would have to say no. I do follow state standards to some degree as a guidance, but if I have a child who's mathy, I am certainly not going to leave them in a 7th grade math when they can do 9th grade math. And you can still get credit for that. That's, again, the beauty of homeschooling is you're not stuck in that. You're not in government school, they would have to wait for the rest of the class to finish. At home, you just keep moving them right along. No holding them back. If they want to finish a couple of years early and they've done it, great. There's no more to add to it. So I do follow state standards. I also follow university standards, and that's a personal choice for our family. In case our kids do want to go to college, they are well covered in that area above and beyond, and that's our personal feeling on that. Whatever they want to do with it, I've equipped them along the way, educationally wise, spiritually. I've done exactly what the Lord's called me to do, and I've also done above and beyond what if the state would recommend if I follow those standards.
So I think the key here to understanding is that the state standards for California, they are a guide, they're a reference, they're not the rule. And that goes for the public school system as well. This is a reference of what your child in 5th grade should be knowing, but it's not the rule because realistically, not every child learns in exact increments. There are students that plateau in learning, and it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. And that's part of the freedom and flexibility that comes with homeschooling is if you have a struggling student, if you have a student that's running full force, you're not going to hold them back. For example, here in California, my kids were interested in learning about the Spanish missions. You typically don't learn about that until 5th grade. It's an entire unit study that has to do with California history standards. I'm not going to tell my kids that are younger or older, you have to wait until you're in 5th grade to learn these things. That's the beauty of homeschooling, is that you can say, you know what, I don't care if you're in kindergarten or 1st grade. This is how California was established, and let's go visit those missions, and let's learn about our rich history of our state. Those are some things that, again, it's a resource, it is not the rule. Another thing we get asked is how much does curriculum cost? I can't afford to spend thousands of dollars on curriculum. Can you get by with free curriculum? Is there free curriculum that's available for my child to use? Danielle, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, there's so many options. First, we've kind of mentioned several times, having a community, being involved in a community of homeschoolers is really going to be a huge benefit to you. And one of the ways you can find out about a local community, Facebook will have groups of homeschool. You can just look up the name of your city and the area, and there are tons of moms there who have curriculum that we're tired of housing and we would be happy to give away. You're going to see that a lot. Also, even birthday, I was just thinking about this because I just gave some curriculum to someone for their birthday for their child because I knew that their child was going to start using this curriculum, and so I talked to the mom ahead of time, and we offered to buy it for them for their birthday. And so even holidays that are coming up, I think that's a great way. And the library, you can go to the library and find all kinds of free curriculum, actual curriculum books, teacher's manuals. You can get those. You can also go online. There's a ton of stuff that you can get for free online. Teachers pay teachers. I always look up whatever subject I'm learning free. Like I don't want to pay anything for it. And there's a bunch of resources on there. Pinterest. I'll create Pinterest boards when we're doing a unit study, and then I'll go back through. And so there is so much available that you can use that is free. And I do think, in general, we do want to have a heart that is thinking, I want to invest in my child's education, not wait until they get to college, but right now I want my child to have a good education. And so if something comes up that I can't get for free, we are willing to pay for it. But there are definitely ways that you can do it without spending much out of pocket.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too is a lot of people won't hesitate to put their child in, a travel team sport and pay sometimes thousands of dollars. They won't hesitate to put their kids in an after-school extracurricular activity that costs, $100 or more a month. And so this is where really the heart of teaching. This is why people become teachers, and this is why I feel like moms are inherently, it's in their DNA to want to teach their children. They want to seek out opportunities, and they want to look for ways to make learning fun and creative, because it's a joy for us to do that. If my kids are interested in learning about fossils and Earth, we're going to go visit the dinosaur museum, and we're going to pull in all these different elements that make it fun and memorable, because we have our children for this small time in their lives, a very short window, and we have an opportunity to invest in them like never before, and to make memories teaching that would otherwise be memories made with someone else in a classroom. I always say I would not know my children as well as I do today if they were gone at public school. I wouldn't know their personality traits. I wouldn't know where they're struggling and how I, as the parent, can come in and help them through that. Now, one of the things that we get often asked, again, is where do you go for help when you need it? So I know you had mentioned Spanish was something, or math. Where do we go for help? What are we looking for an instructor or an educator? How do we find out about these different things in the community that our kids can benefit from? Jennifer, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Like I said earlier before, the resources for help is numerous, especially now versus 20 years ago when homeschooling was still a little in the beginning stages. And but for now, the resources are huge. And talking to other parents opens up a whole new world of more resources. In fact, we were just quickly chatting, Danielle and I was mentioning something about Spanish and that my child didn't like this particular class, and sure enough, I got someone for you. That's how it happens. You just talk to other homeschooling moms. And like I said earlier before, I don't want to really teach Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and geometry, so I do outsource math. I do outsource things that I just don't want to do. The money that would have been spent doing those extracurricular things in public school, I spend them towards music lessons. I spend them towards singing lessons or field trips. The amount of field trips that we go on, especially when they were younger, were so fun. And you get a group together, and then you got a group discount. So all your bases are really covered when it comes to the homeschooling, especially now when the homeschooling world has opened up and is so welcoming. You could throw a rock and find another homeschooling family that has 20 resources for you.
Yeah, I just think that for parents to just take the time, get a community, would be really beneficial for you to be able to find those resources, reaching out to people around you and asking. And I think just communicating about what you're looking for your child. And it is a little bit different. In the public school system, you drop your child off with a stranger, somebody that you have never met before. And I do think a lot of the homeschool families are great people to have resources for, because it's capitalism. We're not going to pay someone unless they're doing a great job, or unless we trust them with their children. And so those are kind of the questions that I ask, like, do you leave your child alone with them? I would try to sit there. Those are the kinds of things. How great is this class? What are they teaching them? Does your child like the teacher? Things that maybe we don't think about when you're just dropping your child off. It's different now because where your money goes, it's better be a good quality class.
Exactly. So in direct, opposition to the public school system, we as parents have the ability to find the best instruction. We want nothing but the best for our children, as every parent should. And so there's this ownership that's happening in the homeschool community. And so if you're entertaining the idea of removing your kids from the public school system, you have to understand that you are taking ownership of your child's education, and that comes with sacrifice. But that sacrifice produces such a beautiful fruit in your life, in your family's life, that is entirely worth it. You'll never hear someone who spent their time homeschooling their children say they regret it and they wish they would have sent their kids to public school. More often than not, you're going to hear parents that sent their children to public school and say, I wish I would have homeschooled my kids. I wish I would have spent more time investing in my children, spiritually first and foremost, and education comes after that. Because we know that when we get out into the workplace and we send our children out into the workplace, a majority of the problems that they're going to encounter in the real world have nothing to do with an educational factor. It has everything to do with personality and personnel and character and all these different things that are developed in the home. So I encourage those of you, again, if you have a child that's problematic or there are homes, maybe this is God sending you a little reminder. It's time to work this stuff out. Yeah. It's time to work this stuff out because it's certainly not the public school's job to work these character issues out. It's your God-given authority in your home for yourself and your husband or the single parent, if there's one present. Ask for help. Go to your churches. Go to your pastoral staff. Look for other women in the church that you can learn from and be mentored under. This is the time to ask for help.
And that's a big switch, I think, is this idea of who has authority over my child. Who am I going to let determine what books my child reads? Who am I going to let determine how my child views the world, views history, views the importance even of education? I think that there is this huge shift that happens when you homeschool to where you're no longer just saying, okay, government, you decide what my child is going to learn and how they're going to learn it. And now you're taking ownership and saying, no, I want to be the one, whether that's you're putting them in classes or you're teaching everything at home or what curriculum you're choosing, you're now taking that ownership, that authority of this is my responsibility and I want to make the best possible educational environment for my child. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So as teachers and as parents under the same roof, how difficult or seamless is the role going from mom to mom to teacher all the day long?
Yes, those are quite a few times I've been asked that question about the role of teacher and mom. I firmly believe that the moment your child is born, you became teacher mom. You were there to teach them their words, their first words, how to walk, how to eat, so you've always been a teacher and you're always going to be a mom. And there's no cap that I put on during the day that says, okay, I'm teacher now, and then after 2:00, I'm mom now. It just flows. And you have to really tell yourself and be encouraged that you've been teaching your children. This is just a real seamless transition into now you're teaching them even more. You're teaching them more, not only just education, but skills. You're teaching your boys to be young men. You're teaching your girls to be young ladies. This is something that you're teaching throughout their lives. And so I really don't struggle with being teacher mom. It's already in you. So you don't have to there's no surprises. It's already in you to teach your children.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of a false dichotomy, I think, in the homeschool world, because we don't see our role as educators separate from our role as mom. I think there are a lot of things that if you have a child at home and you send them to school, you're thinking, okay, the school is handling that. And so for you, there's more of this shift of they're at home, I'm just the parent. Okay, now they're at school and they're learning. But for us, that was never really created. We've always been teaching them, and involved in that teaching them is, as Brittany was saying, we're going after their heart character. We're parenting them through these things. We're talking to them about their attitude when they get corrected on their math problems. We're talking to them, the two roles just intertwine so much. And even when something happens, if they're watching a movie, it's totally separate from school time. We're going to discuss things as relates to that movie because we're just used to that. That's just a natural way that we've created these relationships. That's kind of how the family functions. And I think it's a huge blessing because with my children, we are so open. My kids tell me things all the time, and other people are like, I can't believe your children would talk to you about that. But through homeschooling, we just have this relationship where we're constantly looking at what's around us and we're dialoguing about it and we're discussing, what does the Bible say about this? Should this person have done that? What would you have done in that situation? How could you have handled that differently? So I just think that dichotomy, that idea is very foreign to us because the two of them were constantly discipling and training and teaching our children just in the natural way that we parent our children as a result of being home educators.
Yes, and the Bible tells us to train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And again, just revisiting that we are training, our homes are a training place for righteousness. That word training, we are training our children every single day. And so I think as parents, we have to ask ourselves, who do we want training our children?
Yeah.
Because so many of us have blindly trusted the government to train our children, and public school teachers. And there's some amazing public school teachers,
Yes.
don't get me wrong, amazing public school teachers. But even if your child is in the public school system, this is a reminder, whether or not you choose to homeschool, whether or not you feel led to, that you are the authority figure in your child's life. And the most important thing you can give your child is not an education in the things of this world, but to set their hearts and minds with a heavenly mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Closing words, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, we have a wealth of information in the descriptions below. You can also reach out to us and ask us any questions that we hope to put out on some more videos for you. God bless you guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.